So what is universal design specifically for STEM? What I have up is the Universal Design for Learning Guidelines. The three major sections I've been seeing is engagement, representation, action, and expression. And this gives a lot of subcategories, and you'll see this all over, but we want to focus on, for STEM and the math and sciences, what does that mean for us? But before I get into that, I want to show an image that I found that has, this, you could see here the person in the wheelchair says, "Could you please shovel the ramp?" Because there's snow everywhere all over the ramp and the stairs. And the person with the shovel says, "All these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, then I will clear the ramp for you." And then the person in the wheelchair says, "But if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in." And it says, "Clearing a path for people with special needs clears the path for everyone." And in the research I've been doing, this universal design and everything we're trying to do to make our classes all inclusive for all students, including disabled students and students with special needs, what we're doing is we're actually benefiting everyone. And part of the universal design that you'll see is multiple forms of learning. So you have maybe some kinesthetic learning, something hands-on, maybe something that's better heard verbally, but maybe something that's better seen in a picture. So let's go and see in math what that means. So in math, we're used to representing things 4 different ways, and this really comes up in pre-calculus with the 4 models of a function. And it can be dubbed as representing something verbally, numerically, graphically, and algebraically. And we do this in math a lot of the times, even if we don't think we are doing it, we are probably representing things in these 4 ways. This is actually a way we can apply universal design to a mathematics course. And we can think about this kind of 4 model system that we've been using to create our lecture notes and our course work, but to also now make sure it's inclusive for all. So for instance, I'm teaching a calculus class and we now have 3D images. There's great animations. So when we go over cylindrical shells in the calculus class, that's actually very hard to represent, especially since, I'm not maybe the best artist in the world. But we have these 3D animations now, and for instance, in this video, they're showing the creation of the cylindrical shells. Now, this video does a lot to now help the student visualize what's going on. But this can also be something we could take an opportunity to make into some kind of hands-on model that maybe we have. All of this is just bringing to light different ideas, not necessarily that they'd be easy to implement, but different ways of thinking about these things. And that's, I think, at the heart of what universal design is. So even though myself, I'm not visually impaired or anything, if I had a model to help me understand cylindrical shells, that would be advantageous for me as a student, even though I'm not visually impaired, and requiring that to really help me think about what's going on. Another way we could think about using universal design is even just thinking about the 5 senses. We have sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. So if first a student, they don't have, say, sight, are we representing what we're doing in a different way, such as sound, which is what a lot of the videos are about, with being able to make sure the screen reader can read something. But that's not going to encompass all of the idea of accessibility just by having it readable by a screen reader. So this goes into our course design as well, because if a person doesn't have sight or sound, it comes down to touch. And this, I'm not saying that this is a solution for every method, every lesson. That I don't know how that could be feasible, especially in this moment, but with the right support, then a person who lacks sight or sound, working with a school, we could implement lessons with touch. So starting to think like this in terms of a diversity of our lessons would be us starting to incorporate universal design. Another way we can do this without if we're thinking about sound or something, is using tools such as Desmos. So Desmos is a link I will put in the description box below, but when a screen reader reads this, it actually makes a sound when it goes up the line. So it gets higher pitched, does something like whoop up the line, and makes that higher pitched noise to indicate that it's going up. So even if the student can't see the graph, this is still very accessible. It could also read the points and such on the graph. This is definitely not the end-all for universal design. So much more can go into it in terms of our own kind of self-evaluations, making sure we're always growing by learning from the student as they learn from us. But this gives us a start to just start thinking outside the box as we design our courses. Now for the sciences, I think the four models, the verbally, graphically, algebraically, and numerically talking about something would work in some cases as well, but actually I think the five senses come more into play here if a student lacks sight or sound, especially with chemistry or biology. Smell, taste, touch would come into play more, and so with the sciences, I think thinking about the five senses would be a good way to start thinking about how to adapt and having more hands-on, which a lot of the science classes already do with labs. But I did find another website. Actually, it's this great YouTube video I found. I'm going to put the link in the description below, but it's Accessible Science, Making Life Sciences Accessible to Students with Visual Impairments, and it goes and talks about the hands-on, the models, and integrating universal design within the sciences. So the question I've had that I think some of you may have is there's so much to think about, implement, do going forward. Where do we start? And so the first start is to actually make anything that's digital accessible with all the tools that are out there with my training videos and the other videos that are out there for us to make things accessible, starting with the screen reader. But we also want to start thinking about, even as we choose images that we're going to display in class or on a set of lecture notes, or as we choose our books, all of these things we want to start thinking about universal design as we make choices going forward. But the first start would be to get things just basically accessible and start from there. And then we just collaborate and keep going forward as we learn more.